ends on Ferguson Mills is quite a distance from that point where the road comes in on lot 10. So my point is that while all the comments are very cogent, that the impact with 11 lots and a stop sign, which eventually will be put there, probably there's a minimal amount of damage going to be done to the existing lots.
I don't agree with that at all.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
I move we approve replat as presented.
Wow.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I think it's important to comment that this is the replat. It is not the concept plan that was already approved by the village alderman, and there's no going back on that. This is simply the replat that is up for discussion and vote today. That being said, does anyone call the question? All in favor of approving recommendation of the replat of Salado Mills Phase 2, please raise your hand. Passes. At this time, the planning and zoning is going to move into workshop. The first matter on the workshop agenda is to discuss and consider modification of the Village of Salado Subdivision Ordinance regarding parkland dedication. As you know, the Subdivision Ordinance is what all of our decisions are based on, and we're legally required to vote accordingly. So at this time, Don Ferguson, do you have a presentation for us?
Just we wanted to put this on here to kind of brief you guys on where we are. One of the things that came out in the comprehensive plan review process, both at this level and the board's level, was that there were several items in our zoning ordinance and in our subdivision ordinance that needed to be addressed. This being one of those. We have a parkland dedication ordinance in addition to a fee in lieu of parkland dedication ordinance. And I think with some of the recent subdivisions that have jumped up, we found the developer being very eager and willing to write a check as opposed to providing the green space that I think this commission, the board, and the community is asking for. So the task that's before us is to see how we go in and modify that ordinance and do so in such a fashion that maybe promotes the provision of parkland over promoting paying in lieu of, which means potentially looking at more significant fees in lieu of to potentially discourage that avenue, but also trying to come up with a way to reasonably place a requirement on the developer as far as how much land we really want. Translation, in a 50-acre subdivision, do you want to require 10 acres of parkland to be developed or to be provided in that subdivision? That's probably not realistic. And there are some standards, there are some normal ways that cities do this, and there are some abnormal ways. The biggest issue you have to keep in mind, and I don't know if the cities did this when they set up their original parkland dedication fee, because I can't find any background that calculates it, but normally the way they do these type of dedication ordinances is they go in and they start looking at the cost of land, and that factors into the formula. They look at density, that factors into the formula. And one of the things our ordinance does not do right now is they look at issues like development cost for the park. So translation, if they're going to give us parkland to be developed by the city for a park, should they not also provide us dollars to go towards the development of that land? Another thing that you do, and typically in these parkland dedication ordinances, which doesn't exist in our ordinance, is you set out the standards for that land that's to be developed. Katie and I were talking about this before the meeting with one subdivision that's going through the process. And You know, some land may be very appropriate for parkland. Some land may not be appropriate at all for parkland. And I can guarantee you're more apt to get the guy to offer up the land that's not appropriate than that which is appropriate, because that which is appropriate is probably more developable. So what we're working on right now, and we wanted to kind of talk to you guys and see if you had any input or any suggestions, we're going to be bringing back to you, hopefully, probably be not this meeting, but the meeting after, we're going to be bringing back to you a draft to go through the process on of rewriting this ordinance. It's going to be a little bit more voluminous than we have in the books right now. And so I apologize for that. But part of the deal is we've got to be able to raise our hand and justify it in court if we get our hand called on it. It's an impact fee indirectly. And when you charge impact fees, there has to be a proven methodology and a reasonable methodology. We've had some subdivisions that have started to go through the process, one of those being Sanctuary, where they're making a pretty significant allocation of green space in their subdivision. And that might be a basis point. One of the things we're looking at is if you're comfortable with the percentage of parkland we have in this community based on the amount of acreage we have in this community, you know, maybe what you want to do is mimic that proportionality in any new subdivision that comes in. And obviously the larger the subdivision, if it's acreage based, that number's going to grow. And the smaller, that number's going to shrink. You can do it by residence, but we're working on a couple of methodologies to bring you. We're not going to bring you just one. We're also going to bring you a fee schedule that's going to be a little bit more significant than we're dealing right now. Acreage in this town right now is going somewhere in the neighborhood, vacant acreage in the neighborhood of about $25,000 an acre. You know, and to require somebody to pay $200 a dwelling in lieu of, the numbers don't work from that standpoint. Don't know whether we're mature enough from a city standpoint at this point to get into trying to recover development fees. Certainly to try to recover a realistic development fee may be a little too much for this community at this point. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. To develop a neighborhood park right now, anywhere from a 3 to 5 acre, 3 to 8 acre neighborhood park is going to be in the neighborhood of about $1 million to $1.5 million. And to try to break that out on a per lot basis in a subdivision is a pretty significant fee for someone to pay. Eventually, we're going to have to be a real city and do something like that. Because it's, again, the concept here is to get the development to begin to pay for itself, and not Katie and me and all of us who are all paying taxes in this town who don't live in that subdivision. The idea is to get people to start, you know, bearing their load, bearing some of that freight. So that's kind of where we're headed. It'll be a significant rewrite that you're going to see. Our plan is to develop a manual to go with this, to explain to people how it works. The other thing that I think is going to be critical in whatever we do, and that is, and we start to do with our other ordinances, is to put in review periods for those ordinances. Land values change. Density ratios for development change. And so I think it's important that you all and the board come back every 3 or 4 years and revisit these things and see if the numbers are good or bad. See if they've worked or haven't worked in accomplishing your goal. So I think you're going to see kind of I don't want to call it a sunset provision, but at least a required review provision in there to update these, especially in the way the dedication piece, just because the land value changes. Do you think we're headed in the right direction versus the basic piece we have right now in the ordinance? Is the question I pose. Yes, sir.
Don, I'd like to restate a comment that was made in the small lot size task force. The comment was made by, I'm not sure it was Melanie or one of the other members, but she said that people do not send their children to parks anymore, but that we should consider the parkland, and this is in reference to how much green space, as green space. So what I'm asking you is whether we should consider the set-aside land as parkland or as green space or buffer space. She was saying that from her point of view, whoever said this now, please, I have a faulty memory, that she likes to see subdivisions that have green space in them. So what I'm asking is, do they have to be parks, or can we designate them as parks or green space to make it more flexible for the developers to actually develop something that looks good? A 3-acre park is a nice idea, and as you're saying, it costs a lot of money to develop, but who uses a 3-acre park anymore? I don't think that that's necessarily what we want. Well, that's why I'm asking the question, Katie. I don't mean to get into it.
So,
I'm an old man, I don't know what's going on.
I can't get into my business parking lot Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Sure.
because there is no public park space like Barrow. Honestly, I mean,
You got kids running all over the place.
everywhere. People want good park space. They want water parks. They want the things with the water that comes out
Splash
of
pads?
Splash pads.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes.
All right,
I
I
think
understand that.
I
That's
think
fine.
you and Melanie have a great point. Green space, spaces that can be wildlife habitats or pollinator spaces. I think it's important, and that's definitely something that we should explore because it's part of a better, greener Salado.
Okay, I agree.
You're so true. And I will tell you, in our business today, there was a day 20 years ago when you said parks, you thought jungle gyms, horseshoe pits, swing sets, those type of things. Today, park space does involve some open space. It involves trails. Trails are park space. Open space is there, but you've also got the issue Kate talks about, the water access piece. All of those type of things. It's a variety. It's a much broader definition today, and I think the way we're attacking this rewrite is it's looking at it from a more broader perspective along your lines, along what Katie's saying too.
Whether or not you call it parkland dedication, that includes green space, we can write it so that
Absolutely.
it would include both, I think, to be there.
Absolutely.
The way it's written now, any developer would be crazy not to just pay you $200.
Oh, it's very lopsided right now.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, we haven't had a lot of subdivisions to deal with this type of issue. And now you're starting to see them. I mean, you've got several large subdivisions that are on the brink of coming before you and the board. And I think it's important that we get this stuff in line and jump-started and in place, to give them the notice in that standpoint.
Donnie, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you were saying you hope to have a draft to us by the September
Yes, sir.
meeting?
That would be our hope, and we're pretty far along there. I just want to make sure conceptually if we're heading in the right direction. It sounds like we might be. I mean, I know people get a little uneasy when they hear that the ordinance could be 10 pages as opposed to 1 page, but sometimes it takes 10 to allow the opportunities and to allow the flexibility and still accomplish the goal.
I have a question
Yes.
while we're talking about the subdivisions and this ordinance. With regards to the number of lots and the means of exits, the roads that connect, and the major collectors and the minor collectors, can we revisit our current standards, or are they in line with the Texas code? Is it possible for us to say, instead of, I don't know, is it 200 lot subdivisions? Can we tighten that up?
Sure you can. You have the ability to tighten that. You can tighten it down to 50 if you wanted to. You can tighten it down to 40 if you wanted to. The one thing that we are also going to be looking at in the way that, and we will definitely put that on the list as part of this transportation rewrite too. But one of the things we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at traffic impact fees. I mean, I'll give you an example. You've got a 300 plus lot subdivision coming in on Royal Street that's going to be dumping, just if you go conservatively, 3.5 trips per house on Royal Street. And yes, there will be a second exit that'll take some of that off, but I'm telling you right now, 60% of that traffic is going to come right down Royal Street. And what mitigation is in the agreement, in that development to lessen the impact on the residents as well as the businesses that are down there in what I call the choke zone, and that's down there at Main Street and Royal Street.
I was just reviewing that. I can't remember where it was in the ordinance. I guess it's page 47. properties, is it 50 lots?
Yeah. And our feeling is that needs to get tightened down and the fees need to get more realistic.
Yes, is it possible for you to have a redraft or a recommendation for us in September on that?
We'll try. There's a methodology issue. Parks was the priority piece that we're working on, and we'll put that in move as quickly as we can on that, Katie. Because it's a concern to ours. I just think, I mean, there needs to be some definition in how that money is spent. Number one, how it's spent and when it's spent. In the park piece, for example, I'll give you an example. They'll give us, Katie writes me a check because she's got subdivision coming in. That check sits. There's really not a parameter or provision in our ordinance that says that has to be spent within a certain amount of time. And it really does need to be there on what and when and where it needs to be spent. The same on the traffic impact piece. Are we going to require them to put turn lanes in? TxDOT, you don't build a subdivision on a state highway today without turn lane requirements, or accel or decel lanes. There's no reason why cities should not have that same type of requirement in place. The concept, are we comfortable with really 2 exits on some of these subdivisions? And I think we need to clear up the confusion in the subdivision so there is no question about how many lots triggers that multiple exit requirement. And I think we've dealt with that argument over the last couple of years from certain people saying, well, does that mean this or does that mean that? It's real simple.
Yeah, right now it says 50 lots or more must have at least 2 points of vehicular access. That 50 or 300 lots is a totally different game.
My point exactly.
Yeah, we need to prioritize.
It gets weird, and then you can add on. The way you read that code, you can add on lots to those, and that may trigger additional. And the kicker is just put it simply. Come up with a chart.
Yeah.
I'm not a more guy, but the kicker is sometimes in these type of things, you have to put more information in there to make people understand it. And a lot of times, if you just tell people what it is you're trying to accomplish, they're more apt to understand it and not fight you, as opposed to leaving it vague and ambiguous as you've dealt with in your development years. So that's kind of where we are. So I just kind of wanted to toss it out. You give me some input.
Don,
Yes, sir.
what's the magnitude of the fee increase? Is it gonna be like 5 times, 10 times?
We're talking parkland again now, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
It-
parkland.
Right.
I think it will be. One of the things we're exploring is if our formula shows that you're supposed to give us 6 acres of parkland, would it not be more fair, rather than breaking that down per dwelling unit, an equivalent, would it not be more fair simply saying the current lot value in this town is $25,000 an acre, to run an average? So multiply 6 acres, if that's what you're required, by 100 or by 25,000, and maybe that's your fee as opposed to giving parkland. People will, because one of the things we heard in Mr. Rosemond's subdivision up there was, you just got to understand the value of the lot. You just have to understand the value of the lot. You're asking me to give up the value of the lot. My comment is, let's go 1 for 1. Why not?
So what we're looking for there is sort of, I'm thinking about a seesaw, a point where the seesaw kind of, it evens itself out, so that we get enough money for the lots, to make it sensible for us to take the money, but maybe enough money charged so that they actually put green space in instead of.
You have to be, you've got to be reasonable with them. And you have to be able to stand by your methodology. But you have to be, and part of that defense is reasonableness. And it is not unreasonable to require a 50-acre subdivision with 100 homes, 150 homes, to dedicate 5 or 6 acres of parkland. It doesn't mean it all has to be in one. It could be 2 acres of a trail, or 3 acres of a pocket park, or something like that, but mix it up. But the consolidated total could be that. It is unreasonable to say in a 50-acre subdivision, be it 20 homes or be it 150 homes, that they have to give up 20% of their land for a park. That's not reasonable. So it's a matter of finding a balance. It is, both financially on the payment in lieu of, as well as the land piece. It's an interesting equation. You know, but the key thing is just making sure whatever your methodology is defensible.
That makes sense. I'm interested to receive the draft.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
Thank you.
Next spring, I'm glad to get traffic because that's big.
It's big.
Yeah.
We need to tighten this up so we have some teeth.
Okay.
Okay, the next item on the workshop agenda is discussion regarding the use of Christmas lights in the historic district. Some of the Main Street business owners brought this up to me, and I wanted to bring it to you because we're over the zoning ordinance. The issue is Salado is a tourist town, and traditionally the Main Street strip of businesses have used warm light Christmas lights to have a cohesive Christmas stroll look. Recently, some businesses have gone with multicolored lights or the cool warm, instead of warm white, they use the cool white lights. Is it reasonable for us to say, put it into the ordinance that the business owners on, in the historic district, if they're going to be participating in the Christmas stroll light up, Christmas lights, that they use the warm white lights? The business owners that spoke with me were very concerned. They want it to look nice. They think if everyone uses the same warm white lights, it's traditional and it's pretty. Do you all have any thoughts?
Well, is that something that we should even need to decide?
Whatever we do, whatever color or style or whatever we conclude would be best, should be done by persuasion and leadership and not by the crew.
Would that be more of a chamber tourism thing than
The chamber.
make them do it?
Yeah, no matter what we do, we're gonna make somebody mad, too, and some of these people are pretty vocal about it.
That's why we get paid the big bucks now.
The chamber has no enforcement of this. There are people, businesses on Main Street in the historic district that aren't part of the chamber. The other issue is tourism. If we're a tourist town, we're doing all of this business, bringing business to Salado during the Christmas stroll period, I don't think it's unreasonable.
Well, I think I agree a little bit with what Tom's saying. I'm not sure we need to make a decree in ordinance. We can certainly make a recommendation, and somebody can do that, I think, without upsetting everybody. And I think eventually everybody would come along. If everybody else is doing the warm whatever, and they're out there with colored lights, flashing neon signs or something, I think they're going to see that.
I mean, I can envision the problem, okay, now the village is telling us what kind of lights to put up, but we're just not gonna put up any.
Well, the village already tells us what kind of lights are permissible in the historic district, what kind of facades are okay, what kind of signs are
What,
okay.
Christmas lights?
I don't think this is any different.
I think it's a lot.
Okay. Alright.
I don't.
I do know that
I mean, I agree with you that it should look the same.
back in my early days, and I don't know if Katie, if you remember, if any of y'all remember, the chamber was more involved, and the tourism office, in helping facilitate those white bags. Do you remember those?
They had lights, a special price from Ace Hardware.
Yes, they would do so basically working on a deal or an incentive to get everybody to use the same thing. So I don't know if somebody wanted to, just if you don't want to do a decree, then just a suggestion to help facilitate everybody using those. They were those paper bag things that were
Oh,
called,
okay.
you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Luminarias.
Yeah.
With the
Yeah.
electric candle.
Yes, and everybody
Yeah,
had
they
them
look
down.
great.
And I'm not saying get those, but I'm just saying
And
if
I
there
agree, it
was.
looked great if the whole street looked the same. I don't disagree with you on that. I just don't know that, we can tell businesses, okay, you're gonna put up lights and this is what you're gonna do. Exactly this, or you don't. And they can say, well, I'm not gonna put up any, what are you gonna do then? Have a blank block, where there's
Yeah.
no lights?
And no,
I
they
mean,
don't get any business.
I think, we can maybe do that, but I think it would require a lot of PR and a lot of meeting time with the owners of those businesses. So we're getting kind of into the chamber tourism business.
Yeah, and not just us being, but the chamber of tourism involved in it.
I mean, everybody can meet at the same time, same place. I guess this room's big enough for that, really.
Yeah.
And see what everybody says.
Well, I'll talk to people concerns, the raising concerns to me. I know that, the chamber handled it in the past, and if we don't think it's something that the city needs to be involved in or enforce, then I understand.
Well, I don't have a problem with the meeting about it and talking about it. And see what it's like. You might be surprised how many people, once they understand the concept, might say, oh yeah, I'm in that deal.
I think most people.
Most people
Well, I
are.
agree. I think
Most
most
people
people do
are
it anyway.